Happy Monday, everybody. I am at school today, but I am assisting with the social studies I-STEP today, so I won't be in class. But we had some important stuff to get done. So here's your warm-up. First of all, happy birthday to Emily Burgess and Anthony Perez. Let's get this out of the way. All right. So there's that. Later today, you're going to take your CFA 14. You are allowed to use the notes you write on the CFA, but you cannot use this slideshow in any way. All right. First thing, hopefully by now you're doing your warm-up, and then the substitute teacher is going to show you a YouTube video, John Green talking about important battles of the Civil War. Make sure you pay close attention, because tomorrow Mr. Amador will be teaching you about Gettysburg, and I want you to understand what's going on. All right, let's get into the notes. If you were absent on Friday, you might want to pause these, because I'm going to click through them kind of fast because everybody else already took these notes. But as you're watching, pause, write these down. Remember, especially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are things you're going to want to remember. All right. There's the vocab. As long as you know these two words, that is 2 of the 10 questions on your CFA later today. All right, so let's give it a shot. Secede is to break away from. And then the people of an area deciding on the issue of slavery is popular. Sovereignty, meaning people rule. Bam, 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 bam. All right, moving on. Fugitive Slave Act. Remember, we talked about it in the movie. White, quote, witnesses were all that was needed. It made it a crime to help runaway slaves. And the judges got paid $10 for declaring someone a slave and $5 for setting them free. It took away, not that they ever got these, but it took away the civil rights, the Bill of Rights, the things we are guaranteed under the Constitution. Today, these did not apply to African American citizens or fugitive slaves. Not doing that. All right, Dred Scott. So you see this. Dred Scott sued because he was taken to a free territory where slavery was illegal. So he figured that since he was in a free territory and his, quote, I know it's upsetting, his owner died, he should be free after that. All right, now here's a lot. The judge, this is the Supreme Court, decided all African Americans, no matter slave or free, were not citizens under the U.S. Constitution, meaning he did not have the right to file suit in a federal court because he wasn't a citizen. All right, this should bother you. Because he had moved back to Missouri, which was now a slave state, his status of free or slave depended on the laws of Missouri. 2, slaves are considered property, and the Constitution protects individuals' property. So think about that. He didn't have rights as a human being, but the other person had rights to him protected as property. The federal government has no right to prohibit slavery in any territory. Therefore, the Missouri Compromise is unconstitutional. Although he lived in the North for some time, he was still considered property, and according to the Fifth Amendment, no man can be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, and therefore Congress could not prohibit someone from taking slaves into a federal territory, meaning the Missouri Compromise is unconstitutional, and Congress cannot outlaw slavery in any territory. Ruh-roh. How could this lead to the Civil War? It lessened the status of a free black man. It reinforced that slaves were considered property according to the Constitution, and it prevented Congress from banning slavery in its territory. All right. Vocab, compromise. We talked about that a lot. The Underground Railroad, and abolitionist are also on the quiz later today. So that's already 4 guaranteed answers. Pause this if you want to write all of this down. All right, someone running away from the law. Let's try fugitive. Network of hidden paths. Underground railroad. An agreement that ends an argument. Talked about these. Compromise. A person who disagreed with slavery. Blah, 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 blah. Tried to put an end to slavery. They were called abolitionists because they wanted to abolish or stop slavery. See how I did? Wow. All right, the Kansas-Nebraska Act. So if you remember in the Missouri Compromise in 1820, they had that line at 3630 North that cut across underneath Missouri. Well, Kansas and Nebraska were both above that line, meaning that the South was pretty mad that they used popular sovereignty because they had guaranteed nothing north of that line would be a slave state. Huh? All right. Kansas elections. They had election fraud. Almost 5,000 Missourians came to Kansas and voted for Kansas to become a slave state. I am confusion. Why is this Kansas and this is not our Kansas? That was the worst impression ever, but you get what I'm saying. I'm trying to do why I am confusion. Kansas had 3,000 voting eligible residents, but on election day, more than 8,000 votes were cast. That's crazy. Pro-slavery vote won, but abolitionists say the election was false and then had their own election and started another separate government. Wow. All right, Bleeding Kansas, also known as Bloody Kansas, 1855. Because of this act, states could now vote to decide if their state would allow slavery or be free soil in Kansas. There were already 2 opposing governments working at the same time in Kansas. One pro-slavery, one against slavery. Which one is right? The people are angry. Unfair politics, intimidation, setting fires, looting buildings, destroying presses used to print propaganda, even death. Look at this. I think this is a real photograph. No? Oh, I'm getting word in my earpiece that this is actually like a painting. John Brown. This guy looks nothing like the guy in the DVD. Do not take notes on this part. I'm just going to tell you about John Brown. During Bleeding Kansas, he started his infamous career of murder. He was originally from New England. He moved to Kansas in 1855. His philosophy was fight fire with fire and strike terror in the hearts of the pro-slavery people. As a retaliation to previous murders during the Bloody Kansas period, Brown led 7 men to attack a pro-slavery town. Brown and his men murdered 5 pro-slavery men and boys, claimed he was ordered by God to do it. These murders helped solidify the name Bleeding Kansas. All right. Do you want to take notes now? And we'll see. 1859 is, quote, successful mission based on what he wanted to happen. Sent Kansas into a civil war. Almost 200 people died. John Brown led a group of abolitionists to raid a U.S. Army warehouse full of weapons in Harper's Ferry, Virginia. Brown's goal was to take the guns from the Army warehouse and give them to slaves in Virginia in order to help us start a slave revolt or rebellion. So it's called the Raid on Harper's Ferry. You may have heard of it. It's in the book. They hoped slaves would rise up and join the cause. He was counting on them as reinforcements. All right, moving on. If you were a slave during this time, would you have joined John Brown? Yes, no, I don't know. This painting is a famous painting of him. It is both on the cover of the rock band Kansas, famous for singing Carry On My Wayward Son, and it's also this giant painting. It's like 100 feet across, is in the Kansas Capitol building. So, pretty intense. Treason. This is just a poster from back then. Oh, that's a Jim Croce song. It's pretty good if you haven't heard it. It's called Leroy Brown, actually. Brown quickly gained control of the warehouse, but was surrounded. No slaves ever joined the fight. He was convicted of murder, and after he was executed, church bells rang in the north to mourn, and in the south, they considered him an evil villain because he was trying to kill anyone that was pro-slavery. All right, vocab, popular sovereignty, we already know. Raid, to attack a place in order to take supplies. Then we have, let's see, popular, people rule. People rule. Raid. Let's see how we did. Perfect. Oh, done. Go. All right, here we go. Presidential election of 1860. You already know who won, but let's talk about it. Slavery became a big deal. Big deal. Should the federal government put a limit on slavery? Would the government limit where slavery should be allowed? How would the government decide? How could the people be safe after something like Bleeding Kansas and John Brown? Who could they trust? Did the government really help and protect them? Could staying a part of the government help or hurt them? Let's meet the candidates. Abraham Lincoln was against slavery, but his goal was for it not to expand anymore. He kind of thought that if he limited its expansion, that it would eventually die out. John Bell against slavery, but he wanted popular sovereignty anywhere in the United States. John C. Breckinridge, he was the vice president at the time, not now. He's not currently the vice president. That is Mike Pence. Pro-slavery and expand slavery. Douglas, can't split the country over slavery, and we should only follow the Constitution as it was in 1860. So basically his excuse, Douglas, was, hey, it's in the Constitution. We just need to leave it alone. All right, who would you have voted for in the presidential election of 1860? I'll let you think about that. All right, here are the territories. These are their electoral votes. So Breckinridge won all the slave states except for, well, okay, he didn't win all of them, but he won most of them. But he lost the two with the most electoral votes. Now, this is hard to see maybe for you. These are orange. Okay, orange, you glad I told you that? So all of these northern states went for Lincoln. Only Missouri went for Douglas. This all went for Breckinridge. You probably never even heard of Breckinridge. This went to Breckinridge, and then Bell got these. And so Lincoln also got these. Therein lies the problem, is that, the problem for the South at least, was that Breckinridge and Bell split some of the votes here. So Abraham Lincoln won the 1860 election with only 40% of the popular vote, which is less than any of the elections in our lifetime. So both George W. Bush and Al Gore, George W. Bush got less popular votes than Al Gore, and Donald J. Trump and Hillary Clinton, Donald J. Trump got less votes than Hillary Clinton, popular votes, but still was elected to the presidency. Lincoln got only 40% of popular votes. All right. Look at this, though. In the free states, he got 100 out of 183. That's a high percentage. What, 98.6%? I don't know. It's a lot of percent. Only 40% of the popular vote. Stephen Douglas won the second most popular votes, but he only got 12 electoral votes from Missouri. All right. Maybe the Missourians should... Never mind. I'm not going to say it. John Bell and John C. Breckinridge split what votes remained, equal not the winner. All right, so maybe they should have just combined and ran as John C. Belkinridge. That's a great joke. I imagine you're all laughing right now in class, but nobody can hear you because of your headphones. All right. Electoral votes versus popular votes, a.k.a. who won? Abraham Lincoln, winner. But did Lincoln represent all the people? Spoiler alert, no. Is that fair? Plot twist, doesn't matter. Don't know what's happening. Okay, picture of Abraham Lincoln. Remind me tomorrow and I'll show you. I have a really great picture of McCoy with Abraham Lincoln. South Carolina succeeds. So they secede. Basically, the South had already threatened secession. There was that guy in the video who was really passionate. It was like, if Abraham Lincoln were ever to be president, we would no longer support them. He said something like that. But he used a little more forceful language. So they seceded. They broke away from the U.S. in December of 1860. So literally less than a month after the election. So probably pretty much after they got the tweets about the election, they formed their secession plan. The people in government of South Carolina believed that the federal government and President Lincoln were going to, quote, attack their most valued institution, which their most valued institution was slavery. All right, let's move on. Other states followed: Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, Virginia, Arkansas, Tennessee, and North Carolina. I am confusion. Yeah, so look at all those states that followed. This was the Confederate States of America. So within a month of his election, all of those states had broken away to form the Confederate States of America. They elected Jefferson Davis as their president. All right. Now we're going to get to the battle at Fort Sumter, because the secession was a problem, right? But Abraham Lincoln was still trying to work things out with them. So the Fort Sumter, if you've ever been to Charleston, South Carolina, there's a big harbor there. And Fort Sumter sits right at the mouth of the harbor. It's an island. And it's there to protect South Carolina's harbor, which was the busiest harbor there. It was also, before this time, a very important slave trading place. Basically, most of the slaves of the United States came in through New Orleans or South Carolina. All right, it could stop or control almost all the trading in Charleston and a lot of the South. The new Confederate States wanted to take over the fort to protect the South's trading. Okay, they were afraid if the Union held that fort, that they wouldn't be able to get supplies in to the South to help them. All right, so the Confederates surrounded Fort Sumter and were going to wait till the troops surrendered from being hungry. Does anyone remember what that's called?
Oh, Mr. Swanson, I think it's called a siege. You taught us about it with Charleston.
You're right, that is what happened. Wow. I'm glad you were here today. Terrible impression of a student.
Oh, I'm glad I'm here today, too. Hooray for your teaching ability.
Thanks. Okay, bye. All right, but that did not happen. Lincoln was afraid to send in troops because if they sent in a bunch of troops, the Confederates would take it as a sign of war and react. There would be a skirmish, and then the war would begin. Instead, he tried to send food supplies to the fort. But the Confederates were trying to starve those people out, so why would they let them get food in there? So they stopped it. So they attacked Fort Sumter on April 12th, 1861, starting the Civil War. I mean, really, that's 5 months after the presidential election, which in 1861, I assume, like I made that Twitter joke earlier, time traveled a little slower than you would think. All right. Wow, look at this photo. Fort Sumter in South Carolina. You can, if I was there today, I would be going to Google to show it. You know what? Let's go. Fort Sumter. We can actually just go right to it. It's pretty great. All right. Wow, look at that. Now watch this. We're going to go to the satellite image and see it. Now this looks like a sandbar, but really there's water around it. So this is Fort Sumter today. This is a national monument. My favorite thing is this little dock out here with this pontoon boat. This pontoon boat, I use a similar pontoon boat when we go alligator hunting. All right, let me zoom back out because I want to show you one of the interesting things is because it's built to protect the harbor. All right, let's keep going, keep going, keep going. So it's here. This is the ocean here. It's built to protect all of the city and stuff. So let's go back in. Back in, back in, back in. So obviously this place was loaded up with a lot of artillery, but all the artillery was pointing out to protect anybody trying to get into the harbor. So the Union held this, but all of the weapons were moored, meaning they were like cemented in, facing this way. So all the Confederate soldiers had to do was basically surround it on the backside, and then all they had was, you know, their hand weapons to protect them from attack. All right. So I thought that was pretty good. And then also, if you go across the harbor, one time we did this and we found a Baskin Robbins literally in Bahrain. I think it's Fort Moultrie. There's another fort over here where they kept all their prisoners of war. All right, wait, this is taking a while, I know, but we're gonna Google drop a guy on there and just see what happens. Oh, oh. Whoa. Good thing I was here today. I don't know, maybe you don't like this, but this is kind of cool that you can do this on Google. So what looks weird about the fort? You can see water on all the sides. The fort is underground. Did you know the fort was underground from looking up at it? You probably didn't. I didn't either. Of course I did. I did this last year. So there's the fort. Now, obviously, it's not underground, but what you do with the fort is what's easier, building a really solid wall around everything or just digging it deep into the ground so the ground cover would protect you. That's what you do with the fort. And then you build stuff up around the edges so you could protect yourself. Hello. Nice north face. USA, USA. All right, we're going back. Okay. Vocab, blockade, to block off something. So, I mean, blockade, it's right there, block. And plantation, a large farm that grows cash crops, often uses slaves. Now, if it's just a large farm, if it's a subsistence farm or a commercial farm, it's not necessarily a plantation. A plantation is a specific term used for a large farm that grows cash crops, and they mostly were slave areas, okay? All right. So let's go. Plantation. Got it? Blockade. Great job, us. All right, how were the election of 1860, South Carolina seceding, and the Battle of Fort Sumter all connected? All right. President Lincoln was elected. They suspected that he was going to end slavery immediately. They seceded to form their own thing called the Confederate States. The Union Army was already in Fort Sumter, South Carolina, so they were worried that they had an advantageous position if a war were to begin. So basically, they started a war because they were afraid of a war starting. I think we've all had situations in life where we were afraid of a conflict with someone, so we basically created a conflict because we were so worried about them creating a conflict. All right, that's what the South did. All right, I just explained it way better than you would think. Let's go ahead and try this. All right, further divided the country politically. South Carolina decided that they would break away. The Confederates sieged Fort Sumter. There you go. Wow. Large farm that grows cash crops. Plantation. Someone running from the law. Fugitive. To break away from. Secede. Popular. Sovereignty, person who disagreed with slavery and wanted to stop it. To attack a place and take supplies. Raid. An agreement that ends an argument, at least temporarily. Wink, wink. Blockade, to block something off. And then railroad, underground railroad, network of secret or hidden paths. Wow, these go to 11. Are we done? All right, guys, thanks for watching. Just to recap, things you should remember. Know all of these words, all of these terms, know these for the thing. And then the other thing is, know what Fugitive Slave Act did. And then know what the election of 1860, kind of what the problem was with it. And then also, let's see, the Compromise of 1850. California became a free state. The Fugitive Slave Act was enacted. Popular sovereignty would reign in all the territories. And let's go back to make sure we get everything we need to know. Just settle down. Oh, and remember that Dred Scott, basically, he was not a citizen, meaning that Congress could not limit. They basically decided that Congress was not in charge of limiting slavery into the other states and territories. So basically, slavery could expand wherever the people wanted it to. All right, and then so last we have slave trade would end, but slavery would continue. And the thing about Texas. All right, that's pretty much it. Let's just fade off with a little beatbox. Good luck today.